I just flew in late last night from Detroit. I was up there for a couple of days, and one of the men, I was so glad to meet this guy, a law professor. He Harvard Law graduate, went to school with same time as Barack Obama. He was at Harvard Law School, same time as Barack Obama. Cannot remember the guy. So, of course, there are a lot of people there, and Obama was there at Harvard Law School, but he couldn't remember him. But he's a conservative black leader, another powerful, insightful one. I tell you, some of the most brilliant future leaders of America, I tell you, are coming out of the black community. And these are sound biblical people. That's another reason why we cannot allow I'm thankful we got one vote. Even though the consequences and everything else, we cannot let this be stolen from. Some of the greatest leaders I think that God is raising up and preparing for these times are coming out of the black community. And, and I said last time, I could not vote for Barack Obama because I could not vote for any pro-abortion president. It is just something I could never cross that line. But I said, I'll give anyone, especially a black person. I said, we don't know as white people. We don't understand what they went through under the terrible, terrible things, oppression in this country, the humiliation, the terrible things done, and they are continued to be done. And it's probably no way for us to imagine how awesome it was to have one of them elected president of the whole country. I said, I'll give a pass for anyone who voted, any black person who voted for him the first time. And I am so thankful, even though I was so sorry I couldn't vote for our first black president, our first minority president. But I just couldn't. But I'm thankful. But give a pass. But after now we've seen, if we go down that road, I could not give a pass anymore. I said, now this is cross line. This is the most anti-Christian president we have ever had in office. He claims to be a Christian. Is he one? Is he one? Let me read something to you. This is Jesus, and I think any Christian doctrine could be trumped. What we think is Christian doctrine should be trumped by what Jesus himself says, right? He's Christ. He's why we're Christians. He's the King. It says, Matthew 24, 8-6. And as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And Jesus answered and said to them, see to it that no one misleads you. First thing he says, deception. Beware of deception. Then he tells us how not to be misled. For many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and yet will mislead many. Now, this has been misinterpreted by many to saying many would come in saying they were the Christ and would mislead. That's not what he says here. He said they would come in my name, Jesus. And they would say, I am the Christ. They would admit that I am the Christ. But they would still be deceivers. That's why we should not trust anyone who just says they're a Christian. We are told we know them by their fruit. What is the fruit? How could a Christian do all the anti-Christian things that have been done by this administration? Let's go over a few of them. The basic immorality promoted of the most diabolical kind, like I said, the shedding of the most innocent blood. How could a Christian do that? I would question anybody being a true Christian who is pro-choice. I do that. At best, now they may be one. It says the Lord knows those who are his. They may just be terribly deceived. But to me, that is so fundamentally contrary to the scriptures that we base our doctrine on, our truth on, that you're, at the very least, you are a really deceived Christian. Okay? He cancels the presidential prayer breakfast. which is a Christian event, because he does not want to offend anyone. Celebrates Ramadan in the White House every year. Why aren't Christians offended by that? He doesn't want to offend anyone. Why didn't his canceling the presidential prayer breakfast? But then to do that, I mean, listen, how deluded could we be? Deception is rampant. If we can't see these clear examples, something is really awry with someone who calls himself a Christian and does this kind of thing. We are seriously deceived. How about an administration that put out in the Homeland Security memo that designated potential threats to America, terrorist threats to America, being Bible-believing Christians who believed in the end-time prophecies of the Bible? You're a terrorist threat. That came from this administration's Homeland Security. Every one of you are terrorists, or potentially. If you believe in the Bible, the end-time scriptures of the Bible, if you are a Second Amendment advocate, or if you are a veteran. Guess who was omitted from that list? Who have 99.9% of all the terrorists been? What group have they come from? Not even listed as a potential terrorist threat. Two of my friends, close friends, who I think are great Americans, some of the most courageous Americans, I believe, one of them in the FBI, one of them in our Defense Department, who was given part of his job, he would brief the chiefs of staff and everybody else. They were both assigned the study of the terrorist threat in America. They came to certain conclusions. They presented those conclusions and were basically exiled because they pointed to where all of the terrorist threats are coming from. They were replaced. You know who is training our FBI, our CIA, our Defense Department? Muslim Brotherhood. We even boasted about putting, they called him a devout Muslim, near the top of our Homeland Security. Read the mission statement of the Muslim Brotherhood. It is to destroy us. And I so appreciate that little girl, Michelle Bachman. First time I met her, I said, this girl could take over the world. I mean, she started challenging our Secretary of State for her number one assistant. Said, how did that girl, your assistant, get a security clearance? Her mother was the founder of the Muslim Sisterhood who wants to destroy America. Her relatives are the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood. How did she get at the top of our State Department, number one assistant to our Secretary of State? Michelle put out a thing. Some of our Republican congressmen started rebuking Michelle. John McCain rebuked her from the Senate of the floor, demanded that she write a letter of apology to our Secretary of State. Michelle Bachman said, okay, I'll write a letter. She went down, wrote a letter listing all the ways that this girl, should be challenged. And this was a basic violation of her vow to defend the Constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic. Michelle, she isn't quitting. She may lose her election this time, but she's not backing down from the truth. Listen, we're being done in from within. And the extremists, they feel like we're done job. Kamal Salim, who preached here last Sunday, was sent to this country to help do us in. It's happening. They followed a brilliant strategy. And it's working because of those who have sworn to defend us. And it is law, federal law, that they be competent or either the most incompetent. CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, an unindicted co-conspirator in U.S. federal court, a terrorist front organization. Unindicted co-conspirator means our federal court found them guilty. We've got all the goods on them, but it's not the court's job to do the indicting. It's the Attorney General's job to do the indicting. Our Attorney General said, we're not going to pursue that. So what care? You know, our friend General Boykin is asked to speak at West Point, our military academy. CARE protest, and they disinvite him. This is a terrorist front. What has happened to our military? They've been wimpified. We've got wimps up there running our military now. I asked General Boykin one time. A friend of mine had a deep theological question he wanted to ask him. He said, how many butts do you have to kiss to become a general? He said, more than you can count. I asked him, I said, okay, this leads to another question. Why are all the coups done by colonels? He said, he answered this question. He said, because generals are political appointees, not appointed because of competence. Of course, he's talking about himself. He's a 3-star general, but he was telling the truth. Now, General Boykin would have never made general if he had not had one friend real high up who saw his ability and his competence and ensured that he got promoted. I don't think he was one of those compromisers. But who is being put? Our top military leader, chief of staff, after the Fort Hood shootings, made the unbelievable statement that he is more concerned about diversity being wounded than his dead soldiers in their own fort at home being killed by a Muslim extremist, a terrorist. What is happening? I believe there are people in our military. We've got some of the best in our military. We need them at the top. Now, there's other ways I believe our military is being thrown under the bus. You know, all the defense cuts coming down, a lot of it's going to be our military pay and benefits. Let me ask you one thing. Why was no mention made of cutting the pay and benefits of public unions, public service unions that are so far out of whack in their pay and benefits? Why didn't anyone mention, let's cut their pay? No, let's go after the military who are putting their lives on the line to defend and protect us. Listen, we've got something so far out of whack in leadership. How about, time permits us from really talking about these things the way they deserve to be talked about, but how about Fast and Furious? Has there ever been a more bizarre program ever implemented by any government in any place in the world before? Let's sell a bunch of weapons to drug cartels. Did not even have in place a way to track those weapons to see where they went. What in the world is behind that kind of thinking? Now, but think about this. I mean, this is the most bizarre thing. No telling how many people have been killed. Hundreds of Mexicans we know now have been killed by those weapons we sold, our government sold to Mexican drug cartels. Hundreds of Mexicans have died. Some of our own Border Patrol have died by those weapons. Can we ask one question? Why has not a single person even been fired in our government? A handful have been reassigned, probably got promotions. Listen, are we going to let this go on? This kind of unbelievable incompetence. How could the president not start demanding immediately, how did this happen? This happened on his watch. Why isn't he pursuing finding out what happened? Instead, we have our attorney general, who is the main law enforcement officer of the land, stonewalling everybody. He's now under, he's been not indicted, but he's in violation and called in contempt of Congress for not supplying the information. This is a cover-up. We've got worse cover-up going on right now in this administration than we had under Watergate. It is worse now. It's much worse. Watergate was wrong. It was bad. I'm glad the truth came out and the consequences were made, but it needs to be held here too. How about the death of our ambassador and the soldiers trying to defend him? One of them even went in there to defend him after he was ordered to stand down. They're saying bullets are flying. They're being attacked. They wanted to go and help, save them and secure them or defend them. And they were told by our government to stand down. This is just now coming out. Over the last couple of days, they were ordered not to go help them. We had military assets that could have gone in there and stopped that, and they were ordered to stand down by our government. What in the world for? An attack on any embassy is an attack on America. That's our property. Every embassy is the property of that country. That was a direct assault on us. Listen, I could go on. We just don't have enough time. This is the most important election in our history. I mean in our lifetime. I've told you every election was that. I believe it's true. Everyone's becoming more important. But we've never had issues like this. I tell you, we've never had this kind of deception and delusion over the people either. Even Christians who claim to be Christians, some of the things they're siding with, some of the people they're partnering with, defending. I tell you, if our allegiance is not to Christ more than race, more than culture, more than party, more than even family, what did Jesus say? If you don't love me more than mother, father, and I understand, we don't pay the price for not voting. There is ostracizing and a persecution that goes on for any black person right now who does not defend and stand for Barack Obama. But I tell you, that is racism. That is an ultimate form of racism. We need to get free of that. That's why I think some of the most courageous leaders in our land right now, and I believe some of the most brilliant and competent, are those black Americans, great black Americans who have stood up and said, I will not stand for a lie. I will stand for the truth of God and His words, regardless of the consequences. And I can go on and on. I hope to get to do this again, but if I get to do it again, I will be yet more vile. As David said, I'll do a better job at this. There's so much more and so little time to address the issues. But these are ultimate issues. Get engaged. You got to vote. And if we don't vote, we are voting for the other side. We are irresponsible. We've got to get engaged. I so appreciate guys like Brian Boyd. They're jumping in the fight. We've got others here who are getting in the fight. We got so many friends. Regardless of who wins, Barack Obama wins re-election. He's my president. I'm going to vote for him. I'll be fasting, praying for him. I will still be preaching the same message, though. I will not compromise. I believe that's biblical. And those scriptures were written when Caesar was president. But there are ultimate issues. And we got to take a stand. Are we going to stand with the Lord and His word, which I think there's never been a more clear distinction? Or are we just going to go with political persuasions? People who do us favor, maybe give us more, promise us more. We're not getting more. There's no worse tyranny than has been imposed by our government on many who they're claiming to be helping and have not helped them one bit. Just put them in worse and worse bondage. That happens whenever you make charity institutional. Government was never given the mandate for charity. Not its mandate. God gave the mandate to government for civil government. That mandate was given to the people, to Christians, to us. We abdicated, so I am thankful to have a government that would step in and say, if they're not going to do it, we're going to do something. As poorly as they're doing it, I'm thankful to have a government that would try, but they're not doing it. It's not working. It's getting worse and worse, and people are in worse and worse bondage for generations. It can't go on any longer. As a part of being responsible and voting right, we've got to become the church we're called to be as well. We got to stand up and take our mandate and quit abdicating to the government what God gave us to do. A whole lot of where we are right now is because we failed. We did not do what we were called to do. We've got to step up to the plate and do that too. Thank you so much for your attention.